Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here with you to introduce to you Dr. Don McMahon, who's going to talk to us about augmented reality. He's a PhD, and Chris has just thrown onto the screen his remarkable bio. So take a look and know that it is a great pleasure to introduce Don McMahon.
Thank you.
Don, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? So you got your doctorate, it says in Tennessee, it is written up here, but just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was a special education teacher for 7 years at an alternative school in Knoxville, Tennessee. And while I was there, I got to work with a wide range of students of several different ability levels, and was able to work with lots of students who were on the autism spectrum. And while I was there, I started using technology a lot in my instruction and found that it was a great way to help keep my students both on task and kind of behaviorally on track. And then after several years of working at the alternative school, I went and worked for a school district as a co-teaching instructional coach. I helped general education and special education teachers create inclusive environments using technology. And then after that, I went to the University of Tennessee and decided it was time to get my PhD, where I focused on creating assistive technologies to help students with disabilities. And really kind of centered in on the technology of augmented reality, looking for what was going to be one of the next big technology trends out there, I thought. And as of this summer, it looks like I guessed pretty correctly, because augmented reality seems to be hitting the mainstream with Pokemon Go and some of the other educational tools that are out there, like the Microsoft HoloLens, and there's a whole slew of these devices that are about to become available. So it's a pretty exciting time to be looking at new technologies to help students with disabilities.
So now you have the Neurocognitive Science Lab at Washington State University, and you're building that to a center for families to come into and kids testing, and what else are you going to do there when it's all done?
Yeah, so our long-term goal is to create a kind of connection between the Neurocognitive Science Lab and some of the neuroimaging tools that we have here at WSU, and the Assistive Technology Research and Development Lab that I'm starting, where we're looking at ways that we can use augmented reality and virtual reality and actually do some research and design work that includes people with disabilities. One of the things that happens a lot in technology is something gets created to potentially help students with disabilities, but didn't actually include anyone with disabilities in the design process. So everything that we can do to make sure that we can actually include people with disabilities in the design process of new interventions, I think will lead to higher quality interventions that are more meaningful and relevant to those people who have a disability.
Okay, so today, Eustacia and I have looked at some videos that you put out, and we'd like to share them with everyone.
Really quickly, I'll just explain what augmented reality is. So augmented reality is where we look at the world around us and we get just a little bit of digital information overlaid on top of it. For example, in Top Gun, when they had that little target around the airplanes, that was an example of augmented reality. Or we've seen lots of examples in science fiction where you don't have to put on a whole set of goggles and you go to an entirely fake world. This is just a little bit of digital information overlaid on top of the real world. And I think that has a lot of potential to provide prompts to help the students learn different things or complete a variety of different functional tasks.
Okay, I'm going to show the video. I'm not sure if we can be heard anymore once it's showing.
Okay.
Oh, it says not.
I would just like to add there that I was interested to learn that augmented reality is wonderful for carpenters in measuring, that they can look at, they can focus their camera against a high ceiling that's got maybe 15, 20 feet there. He doesn't have to climb up on a step ladder to try to measure it. the augmented reality will measure it for him.
Absolutely, yeah. There's some really great ones out there that teachers can also use in their classrooms. One of them is called Carpenter Angle Cam, and
Oh.
I've seen teachers do kind of just what you're talking about with that the carpenters are doing, but take it with their math class. And instead of having a math class where they have to stay inside the math classroom to do an activity, they can go on an angle scavenger hunt. So I can take my iPad, walk around, and measure different angles. And so let's say on the scavenger hunt, I have to find a 45-degree angle, a 35, a 90-degree angle. Hopefully I can find some of those around my school.
It also teaches them about angles. They understand then what a right angle is, as opposed to an acute angle.
Absolutely.
And they can see it and they can experience it.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we find really challenging sometimes with students is trying to make whatever they're learning in the classroom relevant to the real world. And I think that's incredibly important for students with autism. And every time that I can take something from a math concept that's on the page, like a right angle, and then explain to them their whole world is made out of right angles, I think that becomes a lot more meaningful for them.
I do too. And also they learn things by individual example. They can't always generalize. So when you've given them a very distinct individual example, it stays with them.
Yes,
Better
I agree.
than the book.
Okay, well, let's watch this video and see what it shows.
Hello, this is Don, and today we are going to learn how to use the app called Erasma. So I've got Erasma pulled up here on my iPad, but it works on lots of other mobile devices as well. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press a little button here to get up the menu. And you see down there where there's a plus sign. I'm going to click on the plus sign to create my own. There's some preloaded ones here on the device, or built into the library, and then I can use also images that are already on my device. And I've got a couple that I've got ready for us today. One of them is for a nucleus, explaining parts of the nucleus. So I'm going to choose that. So I'll click select. And this is going to make a little vocabulary card where that picture is going to match up. Now I need to make a picture for the word nucleus. Alright, so there's the word nucleus, and I'm going to match that up with this picture. So when the app sees this, it knows to make that picture show up. But we're going to need a little more detail to kind of help it out. So I'm going to draw a little box around my word nucleus, give it some pattern, just kind of like you would like a QR code. Gives it just enough information that the app is able to recognize this pattern Now I've done this really quickly, so we'll see how this works out. Alright, so I'm matching up again this picture for the word nucleus with my little vocabulary flashcard that I've made here for nucleus. And I'm going to tell it that I want it to pay attention to just this part over here. That's all that it needs to be looking for. When it sees that, it's supposed to display our vocabulary term in augmented reality. I'm going to put mine down here so I can see my picture and the vocabulary word at the same time, but if I wanted to make it here right on top, I could do that as well. So I will click next, type in the word Just give this a name. Be real creative and call this nucleus. And hopefully, there we go. So now when it sees my little vocabulary card, it knows that it's supposed to display this picture in augmented reality. So I can match up a picture or a video. And when I take it away, obviously it disappears. And I put this here and it's going to recognize it and have this information displayed in AR. Your students will enjoy doing this. I can't touch it, but really you can match up any picture or any video to create your own little project-based learning activities, working on the science, math, or other vocabulary terms that your students are needing to learn. So really, as much as you can imagine different ways of using this, there are probably an unlimited number of ways that you could find to use Aurasma and augmented reality to teach your students lots of different subjects. Thank you.
Eustacia, did you have any questions on that? I thought that was
No,
very interesting.
I thought it was interesting, and I have nothing to contribute other than my enthusiasm.
Well, what's nice about that one is that it's a free app that's available on iPads and iPhones and Android phones. Every teacher who has access to one of those mobile devices could start making their own versions of these. And while you might be a kindergarten teacher working on matching up A for alligator to so the letter A makes a little alligator pop up.
Well,
I might
can get the student to help her.
absolutely. And one of the great things I see happens is teachers get their classroom started. Let's say a 5th grade classroom working on their vocabulary words, and they work in pairs, and then the teacher teaches them how to make the first Aurasma, do it one time, and then they make their own vocabulary cards, and then you've got this whole class engaged in project-based learning where they're running around the classroom making a interactive word wall with augmented reality cards and this free app called Aurasma.
So how difficult is it to get the teachers to buy into doing this when they're used to teaching vocabulary in a different way?
So lots of teachers are looking for more ways to incorporate technology, and then there are some teachers who, not surprisingly, have taught the same 5th grade lesson the same way for 20 years and are more resistant to change, let's say. I come across both. I think the biggest thing that I tell educators who are more resistant to adopting technology is that they need to be thinking about the best interests of their student. And their students are going to be expected to be digitally literate. They're going to have to do jobs where they're interacting with technology. I mean, if you think about an early entry job like retail or food service, working a cash register now is, cash registers are all computerized. A lot of them now are just a little attachment on top of an iPad. You're going to have a high degree of technology skills for competitive employment, and that's really important for our students with disabilities, that they be digitally literate. And I think there are a lot of ways.
What I would just add to that is it also involves the children's enthusiasm, and it's cooperative. It's highly social, what you're describing. They're going to help each other, and that will speed the learning along.
So much of learning is engagement, that initial hook.
Yes.
If I can start the first 5 minutes of my class with something that just kind of blows your socks off, the next 45 minutes is probably going to be okay. If the start of my class is like a old steam train trying to leave the station, just barely pulling away, and everyone's bored, that next 45 minutes is likely not going to go that well for me as a teacher.
Absolutely.
But if I can get that initial hook in there and get you excited, look at what I made. I made this thing pop up like magic. Now, you will get to make your own, and I bet you can do better than I can. And I generally find they almost always can do better than I can. They're so creative when given the opportunity.
And Eustacia, that's, you're in theater and television and things like that, and that initial hook is very important, getting people engaged immediately on something.
Absolutely. So also, it's a way to engage the general public, the mainstream, into understanding autism better. They in theory, they want to be helpful. In practice, they're bewildered. And lots of times when all of us, when we're bewildered, we just withdraw. And then nobody learns. So
right.
You're offering, I think what I'm enjoying about what you're doing right now is how highly social it is. And that means that the smarter kids who would ordinarily be bored because they got it right away in the beginning are more likely to help others in the classroom so they can all do it together as a group.
Yeah. And one of the big differences conceptually of augmented reality versus virtual reality is AR tends to be more social. If you and I are working on an iPad together and creating this activity, or let's say I'm wearing some smart glasses, I can still at least see the world around me and I can interact with my peers. But if I'm wearing a set of virtual reality goggles, like this is the Oculus Rift, it's a great educational tool. There's lots of things I can do. But if I was wearing these, like I am right now, I can't see you. There's nothing I can see. So I'm a little bit more
removed. You've isolated
removed.
yourself. Yeah, you've just isolated yourself from the world by putting those on. So let's look at this next one.
To researchers, one researcher told me that it's very important when you're working on a new research project that two researchers look at the same screen at the same time, because they each will see something different about it and they will share those differences.
Yep, that's part of, we call it Interobserver Reliability. We want to make sure that, that we're kind of agreeing on what we're seeing, and if there are differences, that we can manage to take account of that. And that's part of what I enjoy about being a researcher focused on this next generation of technology. If you think about how far we've come in the last 10 years we basically have small supercomputers in our pockets all day long compared to, a few years ago.
Yes.
Now I've got these amazing, potential learning tools that are with me all day long. And we did that in 10 years. What's the next 10 years going to look like? And my goal is to try to make sure that the next 10 years is inclusive and that our populations that we serve aren't left behind in this technology tidal wave that's coming.
Well, let's look at this next video, Eustacia.
I was going to say, take us to the next step.
Okay, this is the little monster video, I call it. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But so before we start, maybe you could tell us a little bit about it. It's going to be a little monster walking across the paper. What is that?
So in Erasmus, we had to actually make something. There are also lots of augmented reality apps out there already made for us that we just download, and we put out a little, instead of me having to create something, the little interactive features are already created ahead of time for us. In this one, a little three-eyed little alien pops up, and the student can tap and make him walk around different places. But while that's not probably that educational by itself, I think you'll be excited to see how we turned it into a really educational activity for a student who absolutely hated working on sight words.
All right, now make them walk to the word book. Good. And walk to the word ball. And walk to the word blue.
Yikes, the monster's coming after
Hey,
us.
Muster, go to hat.
Go to ball, then cup.
Ball. Cup.
Push, hat.
And here we are back.
All right.
That was looked like fun, and I was thinking that, and we have kids that work on sort of lower level vocabulary words in a classroom, and then kids that are working on very high level. But like Eustacia said, it's going to bring those higher functioning or typically developing kids over to, they're going to want to play with this. So they're going to get engaged with someone who's actually working on words that are much lower skill, but they're going to go, oh, let me try to do that. That looks like fun. So I think you're right, Eustacia. I think it will bring people together a little bit.
And I think children like to help if they don't feel they're being judged for it or
Right.
watched. That's how they share games.
Absolutely. And one of the great things about these tools is if you show them to a student, that student's going to probably share them with another student. And that's one of the great things that we find with these tools. When I go and get to teach teachers, one of the things I generally tell them is, if you think it's neat, there's a good chance your students will also think that it's neat. If you want to go show one of your friends, hey, look at this, that's probably a good chance that one of your students is going to feel that way. And when you get students engaged in that type of active learning, that goes a long way. And
But this is how all tools are developed. You go back to stone arrowheads when they discovered how to chip the flint, and that certain pieces of stone would chip off better and make a sharper point. One man had to show it to another man.
Absolutely.
You shared, see, we can make a better tool.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, that's what this is.
Absolutely. And that young man there went from not wanting to work on sight words at all and occasionally being, let's say, pretty behaviorally disruptive is a kind way of saying it. Things would occasionally go airborne around this young man, and working on sight words for 45 minutes. And my world as a special educator, 45 minutes on task is a pretty good day.
It's
Yeah.
a long time.
And I mean, maybe that particular tool would, it would wear out its motivation at some point. But I could string a series of these tools together and keep my young learners engaged. And that's one of the things I found in my classroom is technology would be that initial hook that could take a really challenging student and get them excited, because you might argue with me during a reading lesson, but most people don't argue with an iPad. I mean, it's not going to argue back effectively.
Well, also, it moves. One of the reasons that girls learn faster, little girls, than little boys is little boys, they can sit still longer than little boys. Now this gives them something active. So they're not forced to sit still, which takes so much concentration on their side that they can't learn.
Absolutely. And I think there's plenty of options where we can make our learning environments less
More
fixed.
active.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And lots of our European friends have educational systems where they don't have second graders sitting in a desk 7 hours.
That's right. They can't, and it doesn't make sense.
I have some concerns about it being developmentally appropriate for anybody to sit down at a desk for 7 hours.
Yeah, we're built to be active.
Absolutely.
Yes. So our next one is setting up accessibility on the iPad. So you're going to have to explain that, because I did not watch this one, Don. I confess, and I have no idea what it's about.
Okay. Well, This one is not about augmented reality. So one of the things that I'm really focused on is helping parents and teachers and individuals with disabilities know about the tools that are already on their devices that can potentially help them out. And there are so many built-in accessibility features on different technologies that we have. One of the things that we find most frequently with our students with autism is that they're experiencing several different academic challenges, one of which is they are frequently reading below grade level. And anything that we can do to make the content more accessible to them will hopefully increase their ability to actively engage in the information and hopefully make academic progress. And so this video is kind of designed to just show us what are some of the hidden features that most teachers, most parents don't know about, that iPad, which is also good for playing games and doing other things, can also really be an empowerment tool to somebody who is a struggling learner.
Hello, I'm Don McMahon, and I'm an assistant professor at Washington State University. And today I'm in the Assistive Technology Research and Development Lab, and we're going to look at some built-in accessibility features on your iPads. So there are over 1 million apps out there on the Apple iPad store, but the absolute coolest app from my point of view is built right into your device for everybody. It's called Settings. And we are going to check out what's available for accessibility features right from the beginning here in our Settings app. So first here, if you can see what I'm seeing here on the screen, this is what we see with Settings. There are all of these options here along the left-hand side. And if you select General here, like I have, and you've got lots of options, but look for Accessibility. And that is where we are going to be able to do some really great things for our students. So first off, our selection of accessibility features are some vision-related ones. Our first one is called Voiceover. And you turn on Voiceover.
Voiceover on. Settings. Lens. Alert. Cancel. Voiceover off.
As you may have noticed, it immediately starts talking and reading and explaining what's happening on the screen. Voiceover is designed for people with some fairly significant vision impairments or who are completely blind. And what I found for many people who have vision impairments, they can get used to listening to text at a much higher rate than I can listen to it and process it. So I'm going to move my little slider for the speaking rate more towards Mr. Turtle than Mr. Rabbit because I can't pay attention that fast. But some other important things for you to be aware of, let's say you're working with a student who uses Braille. A lot of new Braille readers will actually have a Bluetooth connection or be able to connect directly to an iPad. So be aware that your mobile devices can interact with Braille devices, which is a really amazing commitment to accessibility features. There's also something here called Rotor, which has a whole selection of additional little movements rather than just touching and selecting things. You can do twisting and selecting movements like this, which can be very helpful for learners or people with vision impairments. But that's a little bit more complicated than we're going to go into for this, but just be aware that that's out there. Let's go back to our list of accessibility features. There's also zoom. We can zoom into text and make it a little bit larger. We can invert colors and make, instead of black text on white, we can make it white text on a black background, which has been shown to be easier for some readers. We can make everything grayscale as well. But my favorite accessibility feature is called Speak Selection. And instead of reading the entire screen, it is just about reading selected words or paragraphs that you select, whether it's an individual word or it can be a whole section of text. Just like VoiceOver, we can choose how fast or slow this goes. Again, I can only take in so much information, so I'm going to keep mine pretty slow. But I really encourage you to select this option right below speaking rate called highlight content. And whenever possible, it will highlight the words individually as they're being read. We know from lots of previous reading research out there that highlighting words as they're being read aloud in text-to-speech can be a really powerful comprehension strategy to help struggling readers. So that's built in, not a couple of $100 piece of software. This is just a built-in feature on your iPad. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to go over to a web page, and I'm just going to select some text here. It's the Olympics right now, and apparently a lot of people think this one Olympian looks like Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't think he does. But so that's how that sounds like. And another great way to use this is, let's say you had a student who had a read aloud testing accommodation. Read aloud testing is one of our most common testing accommodations. So you could take your, let's say, 8th grade test or 5th grade science test and put it in iBooks and have your students select anything that they wanted to hear. And now it's reading the words and highlighting each word as it's being read aloud. But it could also do each individual question on, let's say, your test for you. And so instead of you reading your test aloud to a group of 8 students who have read aloud testing accommodations, you could read or they could listen to question 2 as many times as they needed to process question 2, while maybe another student is able to go ahead and move on to question 3 and take the test at their own pace. Or they could do something like an advanced test taking strategy by going and skipping a question that's really hard and moving on to something that's a little bit easier. And we teach that strategy to other students, but for our students with read aloud testing accommodations, they don't get that opportunity as often because we generally do read aloud testing in a group of 3 to 8 students, and everyone kind of goes along takes the test at the same pace as the teacher reading it. It also doesn't give them much time to just listen to a question and have some uninterrupted time to kind of process it and work through the question. So I'm a big fan for read aloud testing accommodations of using text-to-speech and allowing students to move at their own pace. One of the first things that people frequently are concerned about, though, with this idea is how do I make sure that my students stay on the test that I want them to hear and not go off and go play Angry Birds or go off on the internet. And so the last accessibility feature that I want to highlight right now is called guided access. So I just scroll down through the accessibility features. It's kind of here at the bottom, guided access. Now I have mine turned on. You set a little passcode. My passcode is 1234. You will need to pick something harder because your students will figure out 1234. But for me right now, it's working pretty well. At least I can remember it. But I can go over to pretty much any app that's on my iPad. I'm going to go back to iBooks, and I'm going to press the home button really quickly 3 times. And guided access has started. And if I want to turn it off, I just put in my passcode, and that's what it looks like. I can choose to turn on or off certain parts of the screen. So let's say if there was a menu up here at the top that I didn't want my students to have access to, or settings or something, I can actually gray out part of the screen and prevent my students from getting to a different app. This comes in handy for many special education teachers who are working with students with complex communication needs. So this is an app called Verbally. And I might want my student to, let's say for a certain period of time in class, only be using their device as a communication tool. I press the home button 3 times to turn on guided access. And now guided access is started. If I need to turn it off, I can do that passcode. And let's say in this case, I didn't want my student to be able to use the settings app, the settings here. So I'm going to draw a little gray box around settings. And as you can see, it's kind of grayed out here. And now my student can't go to anything. They can't change the settings on this, and they can't go to anything else. If I go try to play Angry Birds, I get a message, guided access is now started, and I have to put in the passcode to go to anything else. But you can use guided access in your classroom. Let's say you're doing a station teaching a lesson, and you want to make sure that when your students rotate to that table at the back of the room to use the iPads to do a certain math app, that they don't go play Angry Birds or Pokemon Go or anything else. That way, if you have guided access on, you can be sure that they're exactly where they need to be, which is one less thing that you have to worry about as a teacher or a parent. So that's how we can use some of these accessibility features that are built into our device. There are some other ones for hearing and closed captioning and other ones that you can also check out, and some accessibility features for assistive touch. There's also switch support. So if you have a student with limited mobility or fine motor, they can use a switch to select certain things as well. So just be aware of that. And that's here in interaction control. There's more here in the settings than I could ever possibly get to in a short amount of time. So thanks for watching, but these are some of the ones I like a lot.
Right. So these are the built-in accessibility features for the iPad. And anytime, and there are similar ones if you have an Android or Samsung phone. But all someone has to do is go to the settings, search for accessibility. What's on the screen there, or what was being shown, was an example of what it looked like on the iPad. And I can select and highlight text from, let's say, a website. Let's say I was a student that really loved horses. And so I could go to a website about horses, highlight those words, and have those words read aloud to me. Or if I was reading a book and having a hard time with a section of the book, I could highlight that paragraph and have those words read to me. And that does a whole lot to make text a lot more accessible for students with disabilities.
And it reads it in like a computer voice? Is that what happens? It's just a little computer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This one, they'd all be kind of just built-in text-to-speech options. And one of the things that, unfortunately, most teachers don't seem to know is that these tools are available. And if you've been into a school, especially a special education classroom, one of the things that you will find fairly frequently is that students are having their tests read aloud to them. It's one of our most common accommodations for testing. And here's a way that a teacher could use these built-in accessibility features to allow a student to get through, to listen to each question of a test at their own pace. The other ones that's incredibly helpful for teachers and parents working with students with autism is a feature called guided access. So let's say I had a child with autism that had complex communication needs and needed to use something like Proloquo2Go or some type of communication app. Using guided access, I can make sure that they are always, that whatever app I want them to use, let's say it's a communication tool, that it's always available, and that my child is using the iPad as a communication tool. And then if I want to give them some time to play Angry Birds or some other type of more of a game experience, I can take off guided access and let them play a game for a little bit. But when I need them to always be using that particular iPad as a communication tool, I can make sure that they can't go play Angry Birds with it.
Okay, so you have some control over what a student's doing on the iPad.
Absolutely.
Which is always a fear that teachers have. They're just going to sit there and play on them and not do any work. So.
Yep. When I do big professional developments for teachers and we do an 8-hour, 7-hour training for teachers on how to use mobile devices in the classrooms. One of the things that we do in the first hour is go through the settings and just what's possible with the settings. And I've never had an audience yet go, wow, I didn't learn anything. They're always blown away with, hey, guided access, that would solve this problem that I had yesterday, and here's what happened. Well, and it's been there all along.
What I do miss as I watch all this is the human process. I think of Temple when she was in 3rd grade and she couldn't read, and her teacher called me and she said, can you teach her? Because she said, I find that children who get beyond 3rd grade without being able to read are going to have continuous trouble. Well, Temple and I figured we'd take the Wizard of Oz, which has always pleased children for 100 years. And I'd say, I'll read a paragraph, and then you read a paragraph. Well, I'd read a little more than a paragraph, just enough to pull her into the story so that she wanted to know what would happen. I'd say, okay, now you read. And it was worth her while to sound out the words and struggle and get it. And she could get it because she wanted the story. And we have 2 things there. We have a story, because we are storytelling creatures. And we have each other, mother and daughter. And I don't want us to cease to be human while the machines take over.
I agree.
That would be my only argument against all this.
Well, one of the things that I get excited about is when I share technology in the classroom with students. It's not uncommon for me to get a phone call from a parent or meet a parent who's picking up their child and hear them say, you won't believe what he or she just showed me last night. And we had this great experience because my child was excited about showing me something that they learned at school today. And that hasn't happened in a really long time.
Well, what you're talking about, and I agree totally, is there's a great deal about the educational system that needs to be revised. And at the moment, we're stuck. We're trying to push all children into the same educational scheme. And it's kind of like the old Greek myth about, do you remember Procrustes, the tyrant who had an iron bed that everybody fitted into? If you were too short, he put you on a rack and pulled you out. If you were too long, he lopped off your legs. Well, we're kind of doing that with education right now, a little bit stuck. And I think maybe what you're offering, Don, is the way out of this iron bed. So that's where I put my hopes.
I agree with you. Between some of the high stakes testing and the one-size-fits-all pacing guides that we have students in, I think one of the things that we'll see is these tools at some point will start to kind of allow students to learn at their own pace, and we're going to be okay with them learning at their own pace.
And that's so important. We cannot, one size does not fit all.
Love that.
One pace does not fit all.
Absolutely. And one of the, I think, exciting things about mobile learning tools is I don't think learning is necessarily a linear process. You know, we have a system designed right now that this comes after this, and then in October we're working on this, and then chapter 7, and then 8. And you know, when I think back on my own learning, you know, I had different little sets of skills at different points. You know, as a 5th grader, I knew a lot of 8th grade social studies and could have mastered some of that content. I was probably working still as a 5th grader on 3rd grade math, or should be, because It always took me a little bit longer in math, you know. But right now it's a little bit of you either stay on the train at the right pace or you're falling off the train.
That's right. You're being fitted into that iron bed. And
yeah. I hadn't thought about that Greek reference in a long time.
But it's a wonderful weapon against that, because I get this from parents who are saying, my child can't fit in that way. And the IEPs are driving parents crazy, because the IEP says, well, where do you see your child next year? I don't know about them, but I know Raising Temple, I thought next year. I haven't even figured out next week or tomorrow or tonight.
Yeah, that's one of the things, kind of coming back again to universal design for learning. One of the core beliefs in universal design for learning is that it's not necessarily our students that have disabilities. Maybe the curriculum itself is disabling.
And disabled.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not only damaging children that are coming along, but it in itself is disabled.
Yep. And then if we can give them some greater flexibility, then we're going to have much better outcomes for all learners at that pace. And you're absolutely right about the IEP goals. While they're better than, the exclusion that we experienced in the 1950s and 60s, maybe it's time to look at some ways of improving them, because I come across educators all the time who are like, how am I supposed to look into my crystal ball here and pick 5 magical goals and objectives, or 12 magical goals and objectives, that this is what the student will be working on for the next year? And when you look at the actual curriculum, it has all of this richness and depth. And let's just take math. Like, we tend to write math elementary goals. We'll learn 7 out of 10 multiplication tables, 4 out of 5 time accuracy, and that kind of makes a special educator sometimes tunnel visioned on, I'm working on these goals. Yes. When in reality, that 4th grade math curriculum looks at probability, geometric reasoning, all of which might be areas of strength that could be developed.
All this spreads over to other systems. Again, I think of researchers who said, you used the word tunnel vision. What had troubled him as a researcher, he said, there are no cross disciplines going on where each of us contracted with somebody who's given a grant to this research, and the grant is specific, and it may not be. We may not know where the cross disciplines would really bring things along more rapidly. And he said the result is we're all traveling in parallel lines.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in today's research.
Yes. But if anybody's interested in partnering with research, I'm happy to engage in interdisciplinary research. I just met with the speech and hearing department in the medical school at Washington State University in Spokane. And they're really focused on neuroscience and students with autism and helping speech and communication needs. Well, I address a lot of those same things, except I'm in my special education silo and they're in their medical school silo. And we had a great meeting about ways that we could collaborate and break that up. But we see the same thing in science education. Yes. There needs to be more diversity and more students with disabilities in science and STEM subjects, but they're over in their field and we're over here.
Well, that's because the system that's doling out grants doesn't understand. They too need to be educated on how the mind learns, and they're following an old pattern, and the pattern worked for a while, but now it's not working, and they too need to be educated in what you're doing and shown that there are diverse routes and they're not contradictory of each other.
Well, I'm going to interrupt here a little bit and say we're going to show the HoloLens, because that's where we're going with the latest thing coming up and down the pike, so to speak. And let's show this video and hope.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Neurocognitive Science Laboratory and Assistive Technology Research and Development Lab at Washington State University. My name's Dr. Don McMahon, and we are going to look at the Microsoft HoloLens right now. So I'm going to spell out the word lab here for our lab. And so I've been able to label this space as the lab. You can see here with the HoloLens I can put little virtual screens wherever I want to here at our College of Education. So you can see I've placed a three-dimensional shark here, and I've paired that up with a virtual screen of an internet browser with information about sharks. So I can place that screen over there and come over here to my virtual shark, stick my hand in his mouth. I've placed a variety of other little digital objects around the lab here. Manipulating the little screens is really easy. Just hold your finger out and tap the little cursor and they'll go away. That kind of gives you a feel of a few of the capabilities of the Microsoft HoloLens and its ability to provide augmented reality objects. I'm able to still see a live view of the world and walk around all these little virtual objects here. Alright, thank you for checking out the video, and if you're interested in learning more about some of our work and how we're using AR and VR to create new immersive instructional activities for diverse groups of students, contact us. Thank you.
I really like that one. I think that kind of showed you what you see when you have the HoloLens on, and I believe that Don is going to now put it on his head, and we're going to see him wearing it there.
Oh.
So this is what the student is wearing when you've just put a computer on your head, basically.
I have, and I can still see you and all of the world around me. It's not, it's a little different than a VR headset. Remember, the one that I showed you previously is this one's the Oculus Rift, and there's lots of great things we can do with this as well. But as you're trying to understand the difference, I can still, if I was wearing, when I'm wearing the HoloLens, if you can hold up two fingers and I can still see them. Here I'm just in whatever type of little virtual world that I'm using in the classroom there or at
So
home.
you could see the teacher come over to you and talk to you while you were wearing the computer, the AR computer on your head.
Absolutely. And I realize this is a little bit big. I think one of the things that we should keep in mind about these tools, what I'm wearing right now is kind of like a car phone in 1992. This is still kind of an early example of that. But it wasn't too long before our car phone in 1992 became a little flip phone that could fit into our pocket, and then eventually it became the smartphones that we have that can do all sorts of incredible things. These are going to get a lot smaller in the next couple of years, and they're going to become a lot less expensive, and they're going to become pretty common educational tools out there. And what I want to do is kind of work as a futurist, basically, and an educational technology expert to try to make sure that while these tools are going to become really common, how do we make sure that our population benefits from these capabilities?
And this one, Eustacia, you talked about getting a little more isolated. This one does isolate the student more than having the iPad that they can just move over and hand it to another student can watch and see the same thing. This one, you'd have to take it off and hand it to someone to put on.
Unless they were all wearing kind of similar ones. One of the things that we found is right now we're teaching teacher educators about them, or pre-service teachers about them, and the first thing that they do is, if they're both wearing one, they're able to kind of share experiences, and or handing it back and forth to someone else going, look at what I made. And so there's a whole lot of excitement around that.
So is it going to be possible for 3 people to be wearing them and see the same thing at the same time and all be able to manipulate it in the same, so they're actually sharing a computer?
Yep, that capability is definitely on the horizon, and it's possible in certain ones more than others right now. But I think at some point what we'll have is a teacher with probably a kind of more powerful one on his or her head that's doing all of the hard work of the interaction, and then lots of student ones where they're able to walk around let's say, human model and go, this is the digestive system, this is the nervous system, and they can walk around and see this interactive human model or a volcano.
And not bump into each other because they can see each other walking around it, so that's good.
It's the small things, yeah.
All right, Eustacia, did you have any questions on that one? I think we're kind of excited to see that come to
I think so
fruition,
too. What I think of, and I must find out more about it, there's a new play out called Encounter here in New York City, and they are using some variety of this.
Great.
And what you make me do is I thought I got to find out about that.
Got to go see it. Well,
I can't say anything about it because I don't know yet.
I think we should all go as a research activity.
Yes,
I think so
we'll all
too.
go. Yes, I think we'll put funding for that. We'll all come to New York and go watch that play.
Yes.
Well, we have used up pretty much our whole hour. If anybody is interested in things that Don is doing, they can go to, I'm flipping ahead here, there's the website and at the Assistive Technology Research and Development Lab at WSU, and you'll see more about what Don is doing. It also talks about his research that he's doing right now. And of course, anyone who's interested in, why did I lose your picture, Eustacia?
Yes.
There's information here. This will go up on our website. His information will go up on the website, as well as, of course, information on Eustacia and her book and her writings. And she's got a new writing on the website on speech and autism. So we have a lot of exciting things going on the Temple Grandin Eustacia Cutler Autism Fund. So Eustacia, for some reason your picture is not there anymore. I'm not sure what happened.
Well, I don't know why. Because
there you are. There
up.
you are.
Oh.
There you are. You disappeared for just a minute. You were hiding. I guess if you want to close us up and say goodbye.
What I do is, Don, can't thank you enough for all your information. This is something we will all want to look at again and again, and probably come back to you with more questions.
Well,
thank you profoundly.